What we're going to get into today is the kettlebell swing. No matter how much I bring up or talk about or demonstrate the importance of doing a properly executed swing, I still see people just doing terrible swings where I want to pour like battery acid in my eyes. It's a little aggressive, but that's how I feel. But today we're actually going to break down the start of how to kettlebell swing to the end. And I'll show you my entire progression of what I do with clients, because I think a lot of times when people want to do swings, or they just assume like, okay, I'm going to start swinging. But the issue with that is that, you might not have the prerequisites or the movement kind of kinesthetic awareness in order to do so. Yes, my show is geared towards weight loss, but this is the stuff that other people don't think about, because kettlebell swings are probably one of the best exercises to create like a metabolic disturbance so your body can burn calories, build muscle, and burn fat, that whole shindig. And even for myself, the moment I change my training to kettlebells only, I get stronger and leaner really, really quick. Whereas if I put an emphasis on deadlifting heavy and only focus on deadlifts, I don't really get as lean, right? There is something to training with kettlebells that allows you to burn more calories. And in my other videos, I do explain that the kettlebell becomes part of your body. It becomes part of your limbs. Like if you're holding onto a kettlebell, now you made your lever length longer, meaning the longer the lever length, the more energy it takes to control it. So an example that I give to clients all the time is like, if I hold a dumbbell here in a goblet position, I do squats, not too bad. But the moment I take that weight and start pushing in front of me, it's like, oh, I need to stabilize more. I need to hold on to it more. Holy shit, it's really hard. And if I have my arms out straight, then I'm like, fuck, this is really challenging. So now imagine taking a object like a kettlebell and utilizing it where it elongates your lever for every single exercise. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of energy that our body has to produce and utilize. And if you do that for all your workouts, like it's not like rocket science to figure that it's going to give you your most bang for your buck type of workout for fat loss and strength. When it comes to kettlebell swings, where do you even start? So the first thing, I'm going to assume that everyone listening that is not doing swings right now, that moves pretty well, has probably skipped all these steps, just started swinging. You may be at a position where if I asked you, do you know the difference between a hinge and a squat? You'd probably be able to answer as, a squat is like when you squat. And then if I asked you what a hip hinge was, you would probably be like, something to do with my hips. So already I know that your swing is probably not going to be the greatest. One of the biggest mistakes is people squatting while swinging. Swinging is a complete hip hinge movement. So there is something called an American swing where you go overhead, which I also don't like. So if you look at the American swing compared to the traditional hard style swing. So in the kettlebell world, there's a guy named Pavel who is from Russia that brought kettlebell training into America that made it very popular. So the Russian styled swing literally will just go to maybe shoulder height or maybe a little bit lower, whereas CrossFit created this thing called the American swing. The reason why I don't like it is, as you can see, as the bell is up top, as it comes down, you are now fighting gravity to drive it back. So a lot of times with an inexperienced person that may not have the best kinesthetic awareness, the best body movement or mechanics or some sort of mobility restriction, they're going to end up utilizing the lower back. So see, like he has to actually now at this point slow down whatever bell this is. So imagine if you're using like a 24 kilo, that's 53 pounds that you have to slow down on the way down. Yeah, still slowing it down. At this point, he should be already pushing his hips back. Now he kind of is. So look at how he actually swings his hips It's kind of like a swoop with his knees. Okay, anyway, actually, funny enough, look at that. Pavel on Joe Rogan. Pavel is like this popular that he got invited to Joe Rogan's show to talk about kettlebell training. So, kind of side note, if you're interested in kettlebell training at all, 100% go and watch this episode. If you squat when you swing, you won't be able to generate enough force to propel the kettlebell forward. If you squat, if you think about how the squat is designed, you're going down and back up. And then you have to take this bell in front of you and drive it through your hips and drive it forward. So it takes more time for you to drive up into hip extension to propel the kettlebell forward. Whereas if you hinge back with your hips, then you have more like a faster rate of force pushing the kettlebell forward. So every single person that I train, we learn how to hip hinge first. So something as simple as this case, this is an old video. I mean, look how terrible the quality is, where I'm utilizing the dowel to push into my glutes to engage my lats, because lat tension is going to be huge when I am swinging. And the bench that's right behind my calves is giving me kind of feedback if I am doing a true hinge. Because if I say push back and I lose contact with the bench here, I'm into a squat. So now this is a great teaching tool for me to, or for my client to learn how to properly hinge. Sometimes this doesn't work. And what I've done recently, so this one I really like using. So I use a band, wrap it around a dowel, and now I have tension. So I have to keep tension in my lats. So when I grip the kettlebell, I'm trying to engage my lats to keep that stiffness. So I am now teaching my body how to create tension. I'm teaching my body how to break the dowel, which I'm going to utilize on the kettlebell. And I'm learning how to hinge. So how we do this, I literally get people to slide the dowel down as they push their hips back to kind of reinforce that pattern that we're going to utilize with the kettlebell. This is kind of like the first 4 weeks of training, is learning how to hinge, not how to squat, just hinge, 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 and creating tension. So the other way that I will teach someone how to create tension for the swing is something called RKC plank. That you'll notice is when I am engaging into this front plank, I'm actually driving my elbows to my toes and I'm pulling my toes into my elbows. So that's going to create in my kind of torso midsection like a high amount of tension. So when I do that, I also will reset, because holding tension like that constantly, you're gonna like blow a blood vessel or can get a hernia or something. So as I do this, all I'm doing is elbows to toes, toes to elbows, and breathing out with they call it like a fire breath, like a hiss, like a tss, 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 tss. So even if you do that right now, just think of any kind of MMA or martial artist, every time they throw a punch or a kick, they have that hissing sound to create tension and produce the movement. So kettlebell training is exactly the same thing. You breathe in through your nose and then you hiss out the movement. So here I'm teaching someone how to utilize that breath. So as I come up and reset, you can see my mouth going through the breaths, and then I reset every single time, creating tension. You can even see how my elbows just drove in there. All right, so constantly these two things, the RKC front plank and the band resisted deadlift, is kind of like that 4-week phase one into kettlebell swings. From there, we've kind of built a foundation. Now we can move on to something a little bit more advanced, where we're going to do a kettlebell deadlift. Two things that we just learned is our tension and hip hinge. So as I get into my deadlift position and squeezing the handle to create that lat tension that we were learning with the band. I am utilizing my RKC breath where I'm taking a big belly breath in and then exhaling hard at the top and squeezing my glutes at the top as well. So that would be one of the exercises in the next phase is one, getting familiar with, a kettlebell handle, because, sometimes people are just used to utilizing dumbbells and this is the first time they've ever, really played around with a kettlebell. So I'm going to introduce the bell this way. We're squeezing tight, we're having fun, we're moving forward. So this will now kind of implement the position for learning how to swing. So we'll start off. So a lot of people, and this is another mistake, is a lot of people don't set up properly. They kind of just pick up the bell and they start swinging. And they kind of just like put the kettlebell in between their legs and they start like thrusting towards in front of them. And that's how they get started. But that doesn't make sense to me. Like, in order to make the swing make sense, to kind of start off with it a little bit in front of you, because the moment you drive it back for one rep, it already has, the potential energy. So if you think of like an object in motion, it's that much easier to move, because most people, when they swing incorrectly and they just pick it up from a standing position, they start moving, it's kind of awkward in the beginning. So use like literally physics to make things easier for yourself. So in this case, we're going to start the kettlebell in front of us, and this is called like the 3-point position. And the first movement is snapping back the kettlebell to there and then back, there and back, there and back. And I'm still utilizing my hinge position and also utilizing my lat tension, my RKC breath. It's all coming into play here, and this becomes a quite challenging exercise if you do it right. And it's kind of phase 2 into getting swings into play. So now we've created our foundation. Now we're kind of getting closer to how a swing should go. So we've already addressed 2 major mistakes that a lot of people do, is they squat and swing, and they start their swing standing and they do a weird like hip thrusting thing before the bell actually starts swaying. Now, the next thing that I like to implement from there is something called the power swing. So, and then when we set it down, so same tripod position, swing, and then back down. Drive back, swing, and back down. A couple things that I want to note here, and I want to try to find the angle. Step 1, we're in that tripod or 3-point position. I drive it back. And also, here's another thing that I absolutely hate when people swing. Look at my head. My eyes are facing down towards the floor. A lot of times people crank their neck up. Here's the thing with our spine. Our neck is kind of, I like to use the analogy, kind of like the driver of the rest of our spine. So if our neck cranks up into extension, our lumbar spine likes to copy it. So a lot of times when people feel their low backs in swings, it's most likely because they're literally looking up into extension with their neck while they're in this down position, and then the low back is arched. And if you're swinging incorrectly, you're like stopping the momentum and you have a extended lumbar spine, and that's not going to feel really good. So head is always neutral with the rest of their spine, just like deadlifting. If you're one of those people that are deadlifting with the neck up, then we have more issues to unravel. But as we come up, so the other thing here too, if you look at my mouth, I'm hissing out. A lot of people tend to forget to breathe properly. So if we start from the very beginning, we got a good hinge, we got tension building, head is neutral, and the snap is the big thing. a lot of times people, when they get to the top of their swing, they actually don't squeeze their glutes hard enough to drive their hips forward. Sometimes they leave their hips back and they don't fully extend. So if you want to generate force, that force has to come from somewhere, which is your glutes. Just like when you deadlift, it all comes from your glutes. Just like if you're sprinting, it all comes from your glutes. If you don't utilize proper hip extension, then things like overactive hamstrings and low back pain come into play. You never see, the fastest people on earth or the strongest people on the deadlift with small glutes. They're like huge, they're gigantic because they know how to generate a lot of force. So kettlebell training does the same thing. It teaches your glutes how to generate a lot of force. A lot of people get low back pain because they don't have the prerequisites in order to do this, and they need to develop, basic lumbopelvic stability with utilizing their glutes in, say, general glute bridge. So when I teach the kettlebell swing, I literally tell people, you want to squeeze your ass as hard as fucking possible to generate enough force for this bell to go up. The other thing that most people don't get is the height of the kettlebell. Like, this is almost like probably the same level as like my rib cage, that like the beginning of my rib cage, almost to where like my belly button is. The kettlebell does not have to be up here, because a lot of times people will make another mistake where they think a kettlebell swing has some sort of front raise into it. The only reason why this bell is here is because of my glutes driving forward as hard as possible. So another kind of cue I give to people is, as you extend your hips and you squeeze your glutes, you also want to think of pulling your kneecaps to the ceiling. So now you have the backside of your hip like joints finish the movement, and then the musculature in front of your hip is coming together, and it creates that isometric contraction, that solid base, in order for you to properly swing this kettlebell. Now, the height that I have here is all, again, generated through my hips. And the other thing too is that you can actually see I have a slight bend in my elbows, which is a huge thing. Your elbows don't need to be locked out when you're doing a kettlebell swing. Why? When you start getting heavier weights, the last thing you want to do is have both of your elbows locked out, holding onto this weight, because when you get to that end position and then the weight starts coming down, all that tension is going to start going into your elbows, and people are going to start having, tendinopathies on their elbows, which is the last thing you want, right? So always have a slight bend in your elbows. And the other thing too is, like, kettlebell training is about efficiency. If I want to try to get 30 swings in 45 seconds, if I have a longer lever and keep it there, it's going to take that much longer to go down and that much longer to get back up. If I have a shorter lever, now I can bring that kettlebell between my legs faster, coming back up. Now, after I have all those things put together, my setup, tension. So if you look at my hips, look at that snap. That's what most people really need to focus on, is that hip snap. And you can also look at my mouth. I'm breathing out hard. And again, this is another example. Like my other video, I would say that one's kind of embarrassing of how high the bell went. And the lower, the better. Like, it's an efficiency, right? So good bend in the elbows, good height. And now I can bring it back through my hips faster so I can get more swings in, right? It's all about work capacity. That is kind of the entire, I would say, step-by-step approach to method behind kettlebell swings. Now, there's always little things that you need to add in. Everyone's going to be different, but if you kind of look back of everything that we just did, we learned how to hinge. We learned the difference between a squat and a hinge. We learned about tension. We learned about breath. And then we learned about the start position and implementing all the stuff that we learned in that start position. Then we took the time to slow down the swing to do one perfect rep every single time. And then we challenged it where we did continuous reps, right? It's kind of like any other skill. Like, it takes some time to put everything together. Say we had to troubleshoot. Say we had some problems when we got to the power swing and you're not extending your hips forward, or you're not getting that snap like I mentioned. You know, hammering things like barbell hip thrusts, a ton of glute bridges, anything glute related that will teach the extension, like heavy deadlifts, like anything like that is going to help quite a bit. It can also be something as simple as like moving your feet a little bit wider, almost going into like a sumo stance could help. Maybe you have some sort of anatomy that is preventing you from getting into a traditional kind of kettlebell swing stance. And all you have to do is, go a little bit wider and voila, like your kettlebell swing looks great. But the biggest thing is that you need to be able to practice it over and over and over again. And that's why I have these kind of stages, so that by the time we get to a full swing, the prerequisites of learning how to hinge are already there and kind of like glued into your brain, that you know that when I grab this kettlebell, I'm hinging and I'm not going to squat and do something weird. Right. And it's also about speed too. A lot of times people will do kettlebell swing slow, which makes no sense. It's a power exercise. You want to be explosive. And the other mistake that most people do is they pick up a kettlebell way too light. I see this especially with women. It's like they want to do kettlebell swings in their class and they go pick up an 8 kilo. Like, that's not going to do anything for you. If I gave you a 16 kilo, which is 35 pounds, what's your initial reaction? Oh shit, this is heavy. I need to brace. I need to squeeze it tight. I got to make sure I don't, fuck myself over. So now you're already so much further ahead than picking up an 8 kilo where you're probably going to put it down like you don't care about it. And that's what's going to actually injure your low back, because it's going to buckle, because you're going to go into flexion and load that pattern. So all these little things matter. And I think a lot of people kind of discredit kettlebell swings. They think it's like as easy as picking up a dumbbell and doing bicep curls. Like, no, it's a skill-based exercise that takes a lot of practice before you actually get the benefit. But when you actually take the time to learn how to do it, man, do you see results come a lot quicker than just doing a squat to front raise with an 8 kilo kettlebell. So I'm going to end it there, because I feel like I can probably talk forever on kettlebell training and I'll end up rambling for like 3 hours. But thank you for listening or watching. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, do that right now. And even at the end of the video, it'll say subscribe. So 100% do that. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Add me on Facebook, add me on Instagram, hit the show notes of this episode to watch it if you're listening, and share this podcast with your friends and family. Until next time, you guys are amazing.